There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right. Open up the door. Starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates, and prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind him, and he said, behold, I looked, and there was a door standing open in heaven, and heard a voice, which was like a trumpet, speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us, the things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass, those things which must take place, those things which are taking place even now. That is what this show is all about, discussing the issues of the day, discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. What you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And I want to say also that the views expressed by the host of this show, namely me, are not to be construed as necessarily being the views of Faith FM. However, my views are nonetheless molded by the Word of God, along with the empirical evidence, both experiential and as observational, which I live out on a daily basis. And do I talk politics? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no, but it's not really political, it's biblical. It's not about politics, it's about bibliotics. It's not merely about the geopolitical, but the geoprophetical. Hey, do me a favor. If you are tuned in, if you are listening, I am streaming live over on Facebook Live. You can visit my Facebook page for Open Up the Doors at facebook.com/faithfm 91.7. And please join in the conversation over there on Facebook Live. Let us know where you're listening from. Say hello to one another. I'd like to get a conversation going. If you'd like to shoot me any questions, those of you who are viewing this on Facebook Live, I'll try and keep an eye on my comment stream as best I can. I got to keep my eyes over a lot of different places here. I got to keep an eye on the board. I got to keep an eye on the queue. I got to keep an eye on my notes. But I'll try and watch the Facebook stream and catch your questions as much as possible as well. By the way, you can also email me at ajwhite777 That's ajwhite777 at icloud.com. Oh, baby, it's cold outside. My, is it cold outside on the east end of Long Island. The high temperature today was around 15 or 16 degrees, and the real feel, the wind chill factor, is -7. Oh, yes, indeed. Is it? We're leaving 2017 on a really cold note. Feels like it should be almost this kind of weather we don't get on the east end of Long Island really until mid-January, third week of January. But baby, it's cold outside. But it's going to be nice and hot in here in a minute, especially once I get into my topic, which I will commence on doing even now. Hey, before I do that, do me a favor. Those of you who are on Facebook Live and watching this live stream, please share this into your streams. It grows the audience exponentially. Invite people to like the Open Up the Doors page. Invite them to like my page and get a conversation going over there on Facebook Live. Well, I got to say, I'm excited because the U.S., the United States of America, is finally standing up against the bullies at the UN in a substantive way, and I could not be happier. Yay! And I want to give 3 cheers for Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley, rah, 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 Nikki Haley. And that's right, I'm going to start the Nikki Haley fan club, my friends, because I love her. She's got to be the best ambassador to the UN that we've had since John Bolton. Let me restate that again. She's not probably the best ambassador we've had. She is definitely the best ambassador that we've had to the UN since John Bolton and maybe since Jeane Kirkpatrick. In fact, you know what? The more I think about it, Nikki Haley is to Donald Trump what Jeane Kirkpatrick was for Ronald Reagan. And I always thought Jeane Kirkpatrick might have run for president back in the day, but she didn't want it. She was a smart lady, but I don't want to digress already. But I want to tell you, oh, what a difference. Oh, what a difference a year makes. Because I was looking through my notes from last year. I said to myself when I was getting ready for the show, what did I share last year for the last broadcast of 2016? What did I share? And today is the last broadcast of 2017. So I started to think. I went back and I looked, and I said, wow, look at that. I was talking about the UN. I was talking about the UN just a year ago, exactly a year ago. Exactly 1 year ago, we were talking about what was going on at the UN when then President Barack Obama's last-minute attempt to undermine Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was stabbing Israel in the back a year ago. Obama was conniving with the anti-Semitic UN to divide up Israel and Jerusalem. I'd almost forgotten about that, but I went back in my notes and I looked, and I couldn't believe it was almost a year to the very day. To the very day. It's the same topic, but now it's a completely 180-degree turnaround. It seems, sort of in a way, that Haman's plot has turned on him once again, and the gallows have hung the hangman, and I'm meaning the UN. But before I get into the particulars of the current state of affairs, let me, for the sake of refreshing the memory, because that's what I did myself, review last year's events at this time, because the background of those events is important to bear in mind. On the December 1st broadcast last year, I shared how that it was quote-unquote rumored that the Obama administration might pull a pre-inauguration day surprise against Israel. It was all in the papers last year. The Wall Street Journal had published an article in late November of last year entitled Obama's Israel Surprise. And it discussed the possibility of Obama supporting a UN Security Council resolution that would permanently divide the land of Israel. And the New York Times editorial board had formally endorsed such a resolution. In an editorial for the New York Times last November 28th, 2016, former President Jimmy Carter had publicly called on the Obama administration to recognize Palestinian statehood before leaving office January 20th. In essence, dividing the land of Israel at the United Nations before President Trump could be inaugurated into office. And then last year, December 4th of last year, 6 resolutions were passed by UNESCO. And I talked about that last year. They were denying the Jewish heritage and denying Jewish history to the Temple Mount, to the Western Wall, to all the holy sites in Jerusalem. They passed these 6 resolutions last year in December. And the Obama administration at that time abstained. The United States abstained on a UN resolution condemning Israel. And the resolution targeted Israeli settlements in so-called disputed lands and announced 2 of the holiest sites in Judaism, like I said a moment ago, the Western Wall and the Temple Mount, as Palestinian lands. Because the United States has veto power at the UN Security Council, nothing can get passed without our support. It has always been the policy of the United States government, and it was a policy for decades, to veto all anti-Israel resolutions that had come before the Security Council. But this time around, last year, the Obama administration was working very hard behind the scenes to get this resolution pushed through the Security Council. Not only did we not veto it, we were arranging it, we were manipulating it, we were orchestrating it. It was a betrayal. And I remember talking about this last year. It was a betrayal of Israel by the U.S. at the Security Council. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last year emphatically stated that Israel had, quote, ironclad proof that the U.S. administration actually orchestrated the entire thing. Now, what's interesting about that is, to support this fact, just this past week, actually, maybe a week and a half ago, it was around December 9th, Alan Dershowitz, a famed lawyer, a law professor at I believe he teaches law at Harvard, one of the Ivy League schools. He's a professor at. But Alan Dershowitz is a well-known lawyer, well-known constitutional lawyer, expert. But he wrote an article this week, and it was titled the conflict over Jerusalem, because there's been all this hoopla and conflict ever since Donald Trump acknowledged reality and recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And you wouldn't believe how many people think that Donald Trump made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. He did no such thing. I actually heard people this past week say, how could Donald Trump make Jerusalem the capital of Israel? He didn't make Jerusalem the capital of Israel. He was just recognizing that in the facts that it were. But I digress a little bit. But Alan Dershowitz, in this article this week titled, "The Conflict Over Jerusalem is All Obama's Fault." Now, I want to remind you something before I get into what he says here. You need to bear in mind that Alan Dershowitz is a liberal Democrat who voted for Obama twice. He considers Obama his friend. And yet in this article, he essentially, he doesn't even essentially say it, he emphatically states what Netanyahu alleged a year ago, that it was all orchestrated by Obama, that betrayal. Alan Dershowitz writes in this article, quote, "It was the December 2016 Security Council resolution, the one engineered by lame duck President Barack Obama." He admits it. It's known. Dershowitz is saying the one engineered by lame duck President Barack Obama that changed the status of Jerusalem and complicated the efforts to achieve a compromised peace. Before that benighted resolution, Jerusalem's western wall, the Jewish quarter, and the access roads to Hebrew University and Hadassah Hospital were widely recognized as part of Israel. That's in this brand new article by Dershowitz. He's putting all of the blame for all this current day nonsense on Obama. Netanyahu said last year, quote, "From the information that we have no doubt that the Obama administration initiated it, stood behind it, coordinated on the wording of the resolution, and demanded that it be passed. But then we abstained from the vote. It was Obama didn't have the courage to flat out vote against Israel, even though he orchestrated the whole thing. It was like he used to do when he was in the assembly up in Illinois. He would vote not present. I'm against something, but I'm just not going to vote on it. I'm not present. That was typical Obama tactics. But Netanyahu said that in his statement, this is, of course, in complete contradiction of the traditional American policy, as I said a moment ago, that was committed to not trying to dictate terms for a permanent agreement like any issue related to them in the Security Council. Now, Dershowitz backs that up 1 year later. And Dershowitz writes this in this article from last week. Quote, "Why did Obama change the status quo to the disadvantage of Israel? Congress did not want to change it. The American people did not support the change. Many in the Obama administration opposed it. Even some members of the Security Council who voted for the resolution didn't want the change." Oh, and then Dershowitz says this, "Obama did it as a lame duck revenge against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whom he hated. His motive was personal, not patriotic." What an indictment. What really an indictment. And like I said, Dershowitz voted for Obama twice, considers him his friend. And yet, at least he's an honest broker in all of this, saying that Obama's motive was personal. Obama wasn't looking out for the interests of Israel. Obama wasn't looking out for the interests of Jerusalem. Obama wasn't looking out for the interests of America. Obama was simply looking out and being motivated by his own animus towards Netanyahu. And Dershowitz goes on to say in this article, his decision was bad for America, bad for peace, and for America's ally, Israel. And he never would have done it except as a lame duck with no political accountability and no checks and balances. On December 23rd of last year, the betrayal of Israel at the UN Security Council was making headlines all over the planet. And that's what I did my show on a year ago, almost to the day. It was my last show of last year was December 29th. Today's the 28th. And in that show a year ago, I called for the defunding as well as our departure from the UN cabal. But I'll be honest with you, I never thought it would actually happen. I never thought that we would actually defund the UN. I never actually thought that we would leave UNESCO, much less the UN. Not that we're leaving the UN now either, but there's some things that are happening that I never thought would happen, even though many of us were calling for them to happen. But boy, oh boy, what a difference. What a difference a year makes. Because now we are cutting back funding to the UN. Admittedly, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a start. And something I never thought would actually happen. Something I never thought the American government would actually do. And I'm going to get more into the details of the current status when I get back, so stick around. But I wanted to go through the background and remind everybody of where we were a year ago and where we are today. And I'll get more into the details of where we are today. So stick around, folks. Unto the King, Darrell Evans. What a great worship tune. Welcome back, Andy White here. You are listening to Open Up the Doors, the fusion of heart, mind, and soul, here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, WEGQ 91.7 in Quogue. And like I said at the top of the show, baby, is it cold outside on the east end of Long Island. High temperature today, last I saw, and it's probably even gone down because it's 3:30, almost 3:30 now, 3:20 anyway. Man, it was like a high temperature day of 15 degrees with the real feel on my phone app telling me it's like -7 degrees outside. Yeah, it's cold. It's definitely cold outside. So I'm glad I'm inside doing what I love to do, being on the radio, talking over the airwaves, and just bloviating and pontificating, because that's what I like to do. But let me get back to the topic at hand. Talking about what was happening a year ago at the UN, and it's completely turned around because, oh, what a difference a year makes. One of the things I said last year about how can we go about undoing what the damage that was done through UNESCO and through the UN, and it was suggested, and it was a good suggestion, the best way to counter Obama's plan to delegitimize Israel really is to delegitimize and defund the United Nations, and to delegitimize the notion of an Arab-Palestinian authority west of the Jordan River, and defang the United Nations of any moral authority to bolster such an entity. And it really has, I used the analogy of Haman earlier today. You know, Haman made the gallows to destroy the Jews, and he wound up getting hung on the gallows that he made. And really, seriously, folks, why? We have sent millions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority. We have sent multiple millions of dollars through the years to the Palestinians under the auspices of trying to help their people. But you know what they do with it? They take the money and they buy weapons to attack Israel with. They take our money and they use our money to dig tunnels underneath the walls so they could send in terrorists. They take our tax dollar aid that we send them, and Mahmoud Abbas pays the families of those terrorists who attack Israel. Why have we been sending the Palestinians almost $500 million a year? Why do we continue to support the United Nations, which is not a friend of Israel and which is not a friend of America? And I've said from day one, they don't want our leadership. They just want our money. Well, finally, it seems like those days might be coming to an end, my friends, because we are cutting some, and I'll stress some. We are cutting some funds to the UN. Not enough, in my opinion, but at least it's a start. And quite frankly, like I said earlier, I would never believe that we would even do that. And there is also some movement. There is also some movement in Congress to cut aid to the Palestinian Authority as well. Some bills are going through that need to be passed. And I say good, because I know most of the people I talk to, we as Americans are tired of paying for that snake pit, which consists of the Palestinian Authority, which consists of the UN. And I've been saying for a long time, shut it down. And if we can't shut it down, let them go back to Europe. Why do they take up real estate in New York City? But as I said, we are beginning to cut funding. And Nikki Haley, Nikki. Yes, my friends, I am definitely on the Nikki Haley. I am definitely on the Nikki Haley train. She's in so many ways, not only on this issue, but on all the issues. She's been a great voice, a voice of strength, a voice of authority, a voice of certainty as an ambassador to the UN. So I am definitely impressed with Nikki Haley. But she said in this past week, in this report, Nikki Haley said it's a big step in the right direction when we announced on Sunday the historic reduction in the UN biennial operating budget. Haley said that the plan calls for $285 million to be cut for the 2018-19 fiscal year. Nikki Haley, I'll quote her, "The inefficiency and overspending of the United Nations are well known," Haley said, "and we will no longer let the generosity of the American people be taken advantage of or remain unchecked." Yes, Nikki! Woohoo! Yes! It's cheerleading time, friends, on Open Up the Doors. It's cheerleading time. You know, she's so right. Of course she's right. The inefficiency, the overspending of the United Nations is well known. It's a corrupt snake pit. I detailed all of that a year ago. The U.S. pays about 22% of the United Nations budget, or roughly $1.2 billion that we pay. That's just one part of the budget. We pay 22% of the UN's operating budget, but then we pay another 28% of its peacekeeping effort. That $1.2 billion is the operating budget. Then we pay billions more in peacekeeping efforts, which have always shown and have always proven to be debacles. The UN's operating budget is separate. I don't know why, but it is. The UN's operating budget is split in two, and it's separate from its peacekeeping budget. But we've cut that as well. Well, no. I should say we've cut that. Under Donald Trump last year, influenced, I don't want to say made, but influenced the UN to cut $600 million off of their peacekeeping budget. And then this past week, again, Trump threatened to cut off all financial aid. I like this part. They're going to cut all financial aid to countries that voted in favor of a draft UN resolution calling for the U.S. to withdraw its decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And of course, they're all throwing a hissy fit, but you know what? Good. It is about time. Some of us conservatives for the longest time, and even some liberals, quite honestly, have been saying, why are we giving money to all these nations that hate us? What? And it's always done under the auspices of trying to be altruistic, of trying to be generous, of trying to, but you know what? You really can't buy your friends. If people are going to be your enemy, you can't buy them. You could try to buy them, but you're not going to buy them. They're just going to use you as a sop to take your money, and then they're going to laugh at you. And that's what we've been doing. And I'm glad it's coming. It is coming to an end. Thank God for that. But of course, now they're all throwing hissy fits. Oh, now we've got a president. Hey, say what you will about Donald Trump. He usually, not always, but he usually, so far he's been keeping his promises pretty good. I'm not going to give him an A+. I give him kind of like a B or a C+. I mean, think of what you will about him with his tweeting, and think of what you will about with some of his personality and the way he carries himself. That aside, sometimes it's funny, sometimes you got to scratch your head. I get that. But policy-wise, I have to tell you, he's even surprising me. And most of you who listen to this show know you know I was no fan of Donald Trump during the campaign. You know, for those of you who've been listening to the show for a long time, you know that I opposed him. But when he got elected, I did say I'd give him a fair shot. I'm not suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, which I'll get to, I think, a little bit later, for those who are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But policy-wise, he's been doing a lot of good stuff, especially with foreign policy. And I'll be honest with you, I am a little surprised. I said when Trump would do things bad, I would point it out. And that when Trump would do things good, I would point them out. I want to be fair. I want to be fair and I want to be balanced. But now the UN, of course, is throwing a hissy fit because now they're not going to get our money. And in a New York Times article, the United Nations said on Wednesday, just yesterday, that, or maybe it was last Wednesday. I got a little bit of a time warp here because of the Christmas holiday, but I think this was actually last Wednesday. The United Nations said on Wednesday that the Trump administration's proposed budget cuts would, quote, simply make it impossible for the global organization to maintain essential operations. Well, golly! As Gomer Pyle once said many times, golly. Good, because they don't do anything right with the money they got to begin with. No, all they want to do is cry. Wah, 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 wah. We're not going to have enough money to pad our wallets. We're not going to have enough money to stuff in our pants. We're not going to have enough money to stuff in our socks. Oh, we're not going to be able to maintain our normal operations. Well, they're nothing but a corrupt money pit to begin with. According to Stefan Dujarric, a spokesman for Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Stefan said, quote, the figures presented would simply make it impossible for the UN to continue all of its essential work advancing peace. Is this a comedy? Is this a comedy shtick? The UN is advancing peace? Hardly. Development. Human rights. Really? You mean like with Sudan and Cuba and Venezuela sitting on your Human Rights Committee? You guys are a joke. It would be impossible for the UN to continue. That's the point. We want to make it impossible for you guys to continue doing what you're doing because what you're doing isn't working. In fact, it's worse. It makes everything worse. Let me emphasize something that I said a moment ago. The United States contributes 22% of the United Nations core operating budget of $5.4 billion. The United States is also the leading provider of aid to United Nations organizations like UNESCO, but we've defunded them as well, that rely on voluntary contributions. You see, not only are we putting money into their budget, we're also giving a lot of money just voluntarily. 28% of the United Nations peacekeeping budget of nearly $8 billion has been paid by the United States. And the Trump administration's budget proposal would reduce the American portion to about 25%. We're still, even with the cuts we're proposing, we're still going to be paying 25% of the peacekeeping budget. Thank you, Jesus, for the cuts. But in my opinion, they're still not enough. It's a start in the right direction. Man, I've said this in the past, and I'm going to say it again. The UN, as far as I'm concerned, the views expressed by the host of this broadcast, namely me, are not to be construed as the views of Faith FM. But in my view, the UN is an occupying force in the U.S. I want to use their terminology. It's taking up way too much valuable territory in New York City. Furthermore, the multiple billions of dollars a year we give it in foreign aid is a waste of hardworking American tax dollars. And I say evict and eradicate the UN infestation. I say get the United Nations out of the U.S. Let them operate over there in Brussels or in Geneva or wherever. But in fact, I got an idea. I think even my liberal friends would agree with this. I think it's a great idea. I have a great idea for the building and the real estate that the UN is occupying in New York City. I say we take the UN property there, the building, the grounds, and we turn it into let's turn it into an apartment complex for the homeless. Everybody's always complaining there are too many homeless people in the city, and why don't we have something for them? We do. Let's give them the UN building. I would think that'd be something all you altruistic progressives and liberals would get behind. Let's go for it. I'll be back in a moment. Stick around, folks. Fusion of Heart, Mind, and Soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hanging out, listening to me pontificate on Open Up the Doors, the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. Hey, I want to give you a little bit of a heads up for anybody who's in my neck of the woods on Sunday, and of you folks who might be listening over there in the Holbrook area, Sayville, Ronkonkoma area. If you have nowhere to go this Sunday morning, I will be preaching a New Year's message at Word of Jesus Church in Holbrook on Lincoln Avenue. It's actually on Peachtree Court, but Lincoln Avenue, it's on the corner. It's really, most of the buildings actually on Lincoln Avenue, even though the address actually is 10 Peachtree Court. But hey, those of you in the area, you know where it is. Like I said, I'm going to be preaching Sunday morning for a New Year's message. So if you got no place to go, if you got no other responsibilities, our service starts at 11. If you'd like to come down and hear me pontificate some more, it's going to be a great New Year's message, Lord willing, and by His anointing, of course, absolutely. But now, as we get into the final block of Open Up the Doors for 2017. I have to tell you, I want to end the year with a Theater of the Absurd update. Yes, my friends, when you hear the sound of the carnival carousel, when you hear the cranking of the melodious circus barrel organ, then that can only mean one thing. It's time for a Theater of the Absurd news update. Real news stories that would make the Carnival Freak Show jealous with envy. So step right up and give an ear. Theater of the Absurd news updates are brought to you by 8 clowns in a Mini Cooper LLC. Alrighty. Well, this year ending Theater of the Absurd, I chose a Newsweek article that was written by somebody named Christina Mazza, and this article, quite honestly, I think calling it absurd is almost being generous, honestly, because it's more than absurd. It's despicable. The name of the article, let me give you the name of the article, by this person in Newsweek. The title of the article: How Trump and the Nazis Stole Christmas to Promote White Nationalism. I mean, the title alone is all you need to know about what this article is going to be about. How Trump and the Nazis stole Christmas to promote white nationalism? According to the experts that the author cites, wishing people Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays. I'm going to laugh just reading it. I am reading the article, folks. I am not making this up. I'm really not making this up at all. But according to the experts, wishing people Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays is in line with Trump's decision to ban citizens of Muslim-majority countries from entering the United States. It fits neatly with his refusal to condemn white supremacists when they march against diversity. It's like, oh, I got to get through this. But I can't even get through it without laughing. It's so ridiculous. Saying Merry Christmas fits neatly with his refusal to condemn white supremacists when they march against diversity, and with his condemnation of athletes who protest police brutality against black men. Okay. And then they go on to cite some of their experts. Richard King, a professor at Washington State University, who studies how white supremacists exploit culture, told Newsweek, quote, "I see such invocations of Christmas." In other words, Merry Christmas! Hey, folks, Merry Christmas! But Richard King sees those invocations as a kind of cipher, what some would call a dog whistle. Okay, so according to this guy, Richard King, a professor, of course. According to this professor, saying Merry Christmas is a dog whistle for white nationalism. It's a call for Nazis to unite. You can't make this stuff up, folks. You just can't make this stuff up. Another genius in this article from the halls of academia, some guy named Joe Perry. Wasn't he a guitar player or something, or a singer? Might be thinking of somebody else. Anyway, some author, some guy named Joe Perry, who wrote a book called Christmas in Germany, A Cultural History, which examines the way Nazis used Christmas to spread fascism. Now, let me pause here for a minute. Because to be fair, I haven't read Joe Perry's book. But it is true that Hitler and the Nazis wrapped themselves in a perverted form of Christianity. And I have talked about that myself on this broadcast. But that is light years away from what we're talking about here. Terry told Newsweek in this article, quote, "The far right's engagement in the war on Christmas explicitly posits that there is one single true or correct Christmas. The holiday's true nature is somehow under threat from outsiders and liberals who act as forces of degradation, multiculturalism, and secularism. In this context, Trump has been using the so-called war on Christmas to wage a culture war that pits multicultural liberals against Christian conservatives. He began doing this long before Christmas. Meanwhile, some members of the religious right support Trump's most nationalist, race-baiting form of political rhetoric, including his reclaiming of Christmas." Frankly, this guy ends his article. Frankly, I'm not sure how far Trump himself is willing to go to use the holiday to promote anti-Muslim or anti-minority visions of America, or if he even really understands what he is doing with his Merry Christmas tirades. Thus, Joe Perry, along with Newsweek, says, Merry Christmas, the dog whistle for all of us Nazis and white nationalists. Except he ends his article by saying he doesn't understand. He doesn't think Trump understands this. So, you mean to tell me the whole premise of this article, and folks, I just touched on a little bit of the article. I have it on the Open Up the Doors Facebook page if you want to read the whole article. It's really a despicable article in every way it can be. But he ends the article undermining everything he said. Because the whole premise of the article is that Trump is blatantly using Merry Christmas as a Nazi dog whistle. But then he ends by saying that, quote, I'm not sure if he even really understands what he's doing with his Merry Christmas tirades. So, Trump is both a diabolical and scheming racist bigot, according to these people, and someone who doesn't know or understand what he's doing at the same time. I have to tell you, folks, I will never understand the dichotomy of liberal thought because it's mind-numbing. On one hand, the guy is scheming and plotting and diabolical. And on the other hand, well, he's just oblivious. He doesn't know. He doesn't really understand what he's doing. I don't understand how these people think, because both those ideas are mutually exclusive. But again, I just got to say that those suffering from chronic TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, are clearly losing their grip on reality and any ability to think rationally or reasonably. So now we're being told Merry Christmas is a dog whistle for white nationalists and Nazis, according to Newsweek's experts. Hey, geniuses, I don't know if you got the memo or not. I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not, but Merry Christmas, it's said around the world where Christians reside and celebrate it. Merry Christmas is said in black African nations. Merry Christmas is said in Asian nations amongst Christians. Merry Christmas is said in the Mideast amongst Syrian and Arab Christians. Merry Christmas, it's said in Pakistan and in India and all over the world. A dog whistle for white nationalism? Really? You guys over at Newsweek, along with all the other experts cited in this article, need to be put in the dog pound and treated for mad dog disease, because it's pathetic. It's really pathetic. And that's why I felt like I needed to end this show with the craziest, most lunatic, theater of the absurd article of the year. This has been a crazy year in a lot of ways. You know, as we're getting ready to celebrate the new year of 2018. What a year it's been. Like I said at the top of the show, what a difference a year makes. All the fear and trepidation that we were entering into 2017 after the campaign of 2016, not really knowing where things were going to go with the new president. So much has happened this past year. And, you know, so much is going to happen in 2018. So often people say, well, what do you expect for 2018? Well, I shouldn't even say it that way. What do you expect for the new year? Because that's always, that's always a thing. I expect more of the same. You know why I expect more of the same? Because the Bible said in the last days, these things are going to happen. And there's going to be an increasing momentum of the prophetic things that are happening, in the eschatological things that are happening. I expect there to be more wars and rumors of wars, because man hasn't gotten any better. And Jesus said that all these things would continue to go on. Even as it was in the days of Noah. They were eating, they were drinking, they were giving in marriage, until the day the flood came and swept them all away. It was life as usual. So what do I expect for 2018? More of the same. Life as usual. More wars, more rumors of wars, more signs of the times, more prophetic occurrences for those who are watching, for those of us who are watchers on the wall, for those of us who are prophecy watchers, for those of us who are sensitized and watching the signs of the times. You know, and I'm running out of time here. I've got a few minutes left. But there is a lot of positive things that are going on. And I don't want to underestimate them or not recognize them. The economy is turning around. If all things being equal, with these new tax cuts, with what Congress has done with these tax cuts that have just passed, it'll make the economy boom even more. But you know what? We've got to keep looking up, folks. I'll say it once, I'll say it over and over again. We're looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. And even if things turn around and everyone starts saying, peace, peace, peace and security. Oh, everything is fine now. Remember what the scripture says. When they say peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them. So again, it's a question of, where is your heart? Where is your heart? Where is my heart? My hope and my heart are not in this world system. And like I shared last week when I was talking about Merry Christmas, how it really meant to be bold. We need to be a people of courage who are proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ in these last days. As far as Merry Christmas being a dog whistle for white nationalists and Nazis, that kind of makes you wonder. I have to say, that kind of makes you wonder. If Merry Christmas is a dog whistle for white nationalists and Nazis, what does Have a Happy New Year mean? Maybe that's a dog whistle. Maybe that's a dog whistle for, I don't know, warmongering capitalists or something. I don't know. Big Daddy Weave, Christ is come. And as we go into a new year, my prayer for both you and I and all my listening audience is that we would run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And keep looking up, beloved, because our redemption is drawing near. And even though there are dangers, toils, and snares that lie ahead, keep on fighting the good fight of faith in 2018, because soon and very soon we're going to see the King. Have a safe and happy New Year, everyone. And please join me again, same time next week. And keep it right here on Faith FM, because there's still some great Christian programming coming up. God bless everybody. Happy New Year. And no, that's not a dog whistle. No, it's not. God bless you, everybody.